All right, guys, welcome to our second class in the measurement and evaluation training series. Last time we started to explore what measurement is and why we would want to do it on behalf of our organizations. And before I jump into what we're going to be discussing this time, I did want to check back with you all on some of the homework I left you with. I asked you to think about different indicators within your particular ministry or organization that you would want to measure, and to kind of think through how measuring those different indicators might help you in the work that you're doing or the way that you communicate about that work. So do you guys want to share some of your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I picked to just think about focus on our online giving platform. So givetransform.org, since we've been rebuilding that and relaunching it for the past 6 months or more. And maybe I might be getting measurement and evaluation confused, but I was thinking about it's important for us to get feedback from the organizations that are using it, but also to get feedback from the organizations that have left, to try to get some feedback from them so we can implement some changes. And then what's been a valuable resource is looking at other online giving platforms and to decide what can we implement that's better. And with that, a piece that's come along is just the donors view. The login portal for donors is often not really well taken care of and made pretty and navigationally and appearance wise and stuff. So it's been a big focus for us there. I could talk about this forever, but then in implementing some of our measurements and I guess evaluations we've discovered a piece of software that's for managing software development projects. and that helps us as we find things that need to be improved upon, we note them in there and then record the changes, but then they're tracked in real time of the progress that's happening to them through that software tool.
Oh, wow. That's super interesting. And I'm sure there's a lot of different applications for that tool in itself.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, you've started with the measurement, then you moved into evaluation, and then you went all the way over to the learning side, which we're going to get to a little bit today, but already implementing what people refer to as QIC, quality improvement cycles, or continuous quality improvement. There's all kinds of acronyms you can draw from that, but the idea that we take what we learn we take what we measure and we evaluate it and analyze it, and then we learn from it, and then we use that to implement changes that make us better. So you took us all the way through that, Jonathan. That's awesome. I love the way you're thinking about that.
There you go, Jonathan.
Gold star. How about you, Joe?
Yeah, I guess there's a couple things for what I do, going to areas we're talking about how to help them build healthier teams. There's a couple things. There's the objective side of, there's objective measurement and subjective. I mean, the number side of it, the simplistic deal of you're saying that measurement is counting. One thing we look at is measuring and counting new bodies brought to the table. So new people that have become now part of this ministry, either as the core of what we would call maybe a committee or board, but even more importantly, outside of that, those that are bringing their loan, gift, or talent to the table. So how many new people are we adding to this ministry? Also measuring how many existing people are bringing their new gift to the table. So people that have been around, but now because we've presented something a little differently and given them a clearer role of things we need, are they now actually bringing their specific gift and talent to the table? So measuring that as well. So numbers of bodies brought to the table, also number of gifts brought to the table, looking at those things. So totals of that, because that then brings in gifts, talents. It can result in those bodies being brought to the table can actually bring dollars and cents, financial resource to the table, which we don't look at on the front end trying to measure that, but that's a piece of it. And then the other thing that we try to look at, and this is, truly subjective, is that it is staff and leadership healthier, because of what we're doing. Do they have greater margin? Are they healthier? Are they able to, you know, are they able maybe to do more or to feel better about what they are doing? So there can be a measurement from that as to if they're in a healthier place, now they might be able to actually do more or different ministry because we've given them a greater margin and health to work with. So that's primarily what we would try to measure.
Yeah, I love that. Those are really, really good examples, Joe. I like that you started with the kind of simpler items to measure, the counting things like bodies in the room, number of gifts, but then you add a real layer when you start to measure and quantify whether people are healthier or not. Like that's a more complex system of measurement. And we discussed that briefly last time that we were together, how we can sort of measure some things that feel more like a nebulous idea or are based really on people's perspectives or feelings versus actual tangible, things that we can count by putting it on a scale and giving people surveys along the way to say, how were you before you started interacting with our ministry, before you received training or coaching or assistance in building a team or prayer support? How did you come in? And then how are you different now on that same scale related to your feelings of exhaustion, stress, overwhelm, loneliness in the work? And we can actually turn that into a measure along the way. So thanks for bringing that up. That's great.
That's great.
So yeah, we ended here last time by saying that at its core, measurement really is just counting. So it tends to be something that most organizations can implement in what they're doing with not a ton of effort or change. The most important part about measurement is that we're doing it consistently and that we've been proactive to think through what it is that we actually do want to measure and why those things are worth counting. Because really we're adding administration when we start to do this to what we're doing. And nobody wants to be fully bogged down by a whole lot of extraneous administration. So we want to really be thoughtful about the indicators that we are choosing to measure and set up some really simple systems that make it possible for us to do that on a regular basis, and really something that almost anyone in our team can access, right? So that you can assign one person to this, or if you're a one-person organization, you're doing it. But it could be something where if it's a shared document or spreadsheet, really anyone who's running point on a certain event or activity can plug in the numbers in real time. And then you're keeping up with those numbers on a regular basis, and you can pull that data consistently, which I find to be a lot more helpful than doing it retroactively. So going back to our mosquito net example over here, our Nets for All distribution organization in the slums of East Africa, we are going to talk about different items we could measure just as an example. I think you guys already gave really good examples for your own organizations, but we'll just follow this through. First thing we might want to measure is how many individuals are lacking nets in the community that we serve, because that's going to help to provide a baseline for us from which to measure change. And it's also going to help us know that our services are actually needed in the community that we're seeking to serve. The next thing we might do using that information is go to the community and do a net drive where we solicit donations or funds to be able to purchase nets to fulfill the need in our community. And then we're going to count how many nets came in or how many nets were funded through that drive. Then we might count how many nets were actually delivered to individuals during that time by our volunteers, and how many nets then remain or are left over in our bank, or we could even count how many were not fulfilled that are still needed in the community. So that's not an exhaustive list by any means, just somewhere to get started. Let me go to our next slide here, and it kind of shows you some of the most simplistic kind of little spreadsheets you can use to count things and keep track of them. This doesn't have to be anything fancy. You don't have to even know how to put in formulas or equations in your spreadsheet. You really can just do it very simplistically, right? So this is one way you can start to set up. In this one, you see we have a date of the time period in which we're doing the counts. Then we have the number of nets we need in the community, the number of nets we received, the number we gave, and the number that remain, and the same thing for the following month. Okay, then we might want to go so far as increasing that count with a different spreadsheet that allows us to measure our volunteers, the number of hours they're working, what they're able to achieve during those hours that they work, and then the staff hours that are involved. So this is measuring, yet again, additional inputs to our program of net distribution that we can then use in grant applications or communicating with donors. So here we have, the date, the number of volunteers that distributed nets on that date, where was the distribution, how many hours did they spend, how many nets were distributed, and then who supervised that activity. And at the end of this, we would be able to look at this and then create, a post on social media or put in a newsletter or report to a specific donor that maybe gave the majority of the nets that month. That we had 38 volunteers give a total of 80.5 hours to distribute 580 nets to individuals that experienced a need in 4 different districts. You could even use the information mid-month to communicate that you need even more volunteers to come in and help you distribute the remaining nets. And grantors tend to be impressed when you can show them that you actually are using volunteers effectively, cutting down on staff salaries and hours spent that are paid. And that in itself, being able to report on this information on itself sounds fairly impressive. I mean, it allows you to show that you're doing something. It allows you to show that you're using donor dollars. It allows that it shows that you're engaging your community. It shows that you hopefully are impacting your target communities. And you can put this information in, donor reports and newsletters, grant funding. You can use it to track your gift in kind for your 990. You can use it to demonstrate your need for additional nets or funding or volunteers. So good information to have. I crafted a couple of media posts here in a minute we're going to go through. And, the question I like to ask at this point, we have the numbers. And the thing that would make these numbers even more impressive or even more impactful is if we could add qualitative data to that quantitative information. So I have 2 posts here that we can kind of examine. The first one is what we just went through, just counting those things we counted this month. This is the social media post we can put out to the world, like great news. Nets for All had 38 volunteers give a total of 80.5 hours distributing 580 nets to families living in 4 different slums this month. Sounds good. Like that's a post you'd want to read, right? It's fine. It's great. But then what if we were able to add to that post, and instead of only giving those numbers, we could say, data shows that the leading cause of death in our slum communities is malaria, a totally preventable and treatable disease. We are so grateful to share that you are helping to combat this disease alongside Nets for All. This month, we had a record 38 volunteers give 80.5 hours to distribute love in the form of life-saving mosquito nets to 580 of our neighbors living in the slums. As a result, reported cases of malaria reduced by 74% in this community. You are saving lives. Thank you. And when you read that, it's like we all of a sudden added some qualitative data to that post that now makes the donor feel so much more engaged in the impact they're actually having, and it makes them the hero. The first post, Nets for All, is the hero. And the second post, the donor is the hero. And they get to be a part of something that's tangibly making a difference. So the question is, how do we get to that qualitative data, right? How do we know that we're actually reducing malaria by 74%? And that's actually what we're going to start to talk about in our next time together. But before that, I'm going to continue to try to build the case here with you, because really, unfortunately, a lot of nonprofits stop at the quantitative part. And I just wanted to ask you guys from your own experience, if that seems to be true, and if so, why do you think that this is?
I think it is true. And I think it's because you can gather that number fairly easily, like we did X, we sent, on a Young Life deal, we sent X number of kids to camp, or X number of kids come to club, or X number happens, we can measure that. Um, for the most part, fairly easily. It's then, what does that mean? And how does that affect? And I think part of that is because you need to do some research on the front end of your work, and on the back end as well. So it's just some additional work or additional steps that I see. That means you stop it at a point where, just like you showed in those two posts, that front one, that first post, informative, really good information. The second post, oh my gosh, I'm saving lives. That's such a difference, as a result of that.
Absolutely. That's really well said. Thanks, Joe. I totally agree with that. Anything to add to that, Jonathan?
No, I think you nailed that there. Not really anything specific to that. I think it is important to gather some stories, though. I think some people are really impacted by personal stories. So I don't know, make one up. Like this single mother wasn't able to go to work, and she was missing work more than half the time because she kept getting sick. But after having nets, she's been able to work 3 months in a row or something like that. So I think back on that spreadsheet, there could be a column or a row of stories, and there could be just a name and a couple sentences to jar people's memories who are then going to create these posts.
Absolutely. That is a super good point, Jonathan, and telling personal stories that allow people to connect in with a real human being that they're able to be a part of helping create some change for or uplifting is truly, truly powerful and does create a lot of opportunity for engagement. So yeah, thank you for adding that. I completely agree that gathering those personal anecdotes or quotes as you're there is really helpful. Anytime I do a business training overseas, and that's what this picture is from down here, actually, is a graduating class of women from our business training in Uganda last year. I'm constantly, as I'm training and interacting, my training manual is just covered with quotes from what people say during the class that I just write down right there in real time as much as I can. Sometimes I even record things with my phone so that I can, write it down later, transcribe it. But those things really do make a huge difference in communicating to our donor base. I agree. Okay, so if we stop with the measurement, number one, if you do the measurement part, like clap for yourself, because that's so important. And what you're doing is challenging work. And so taking the time to be proactive and thoughtful about gathering any sort of numbers is such a benefit to your organization. And if you haven't started doing that yet, then just know that that is something that you can add pretty quickly and easily to what you're already doing. And it's a great place to start. We just want to keep encouraging you that adding the evaluation side of it is really going to help you in a number of ways that we're going to discuss this time and next time together as well, that allow you to take the messaging of what you're actually accomplishing in the world to a different level, because you're able to gauge the impact that you're having and whether that impact is really achieving what you desired as an organization when you set out and created your lofty goals and your mission statement, or if there's some things that need to be adjusted to allow you to have a greater impact, or if there's a particular program that is really excelling super well on one side and you want to put more resources into that program because you see that it's doing well, or another that maybe isn't performing in the way that you'd hoped, and ultimately you don't really see a huge need for that program as a result, and so you kind of retract that and use your resources in a different way. So it's not just about communicating to donors, it's about informing and learning ourselves how we can do our work that we're called to do in the most effective ways. So considering nets for all, let's say we had done the measurement side, but we had not invested in the evaluation side yet. And so we really aren't quite sure as an organization whether we're having the impact we want. So skip that second post I wrote, just think about the first one. And let's just say we haven't had a chance to learn yet whether we're impacting our community in the appropriate way. Our goal as an organization is to reduce deaths that occur as a result of malaria. But we haven't done our evaluation. So what if, we'd been operating for 2 years and we come to find out that we really haven't impacted the rates of malaria in our community? We're giving away nets, but it seems like malaria instances are still really high. When we interview clinics or interview families, we don't see really any change in that area. Well, that's really good information for us to have, right? Because we're investing a ton in this idea that mosquito nets are going to reduce malaria in our community, and it's not happening. Well, we want to know, why is it not happening? So now, because we have that information, we can dig deeper and figure out, well, maybe we interview a program beneficiary and find out that they received 5 nets from our organization over the past 2 years. But some of them they used as fishing nets, and others they traded, for something they wanted more, food, or maybe it was an addictive substance, but they weren't actually using the nets for what they were intended. And maybe we talked to another family and found out, they had the nets, but they were too hot. They restricted airflow and they didn't want to use the nets, or they were storing them improperly. And so they have holes in them and they're not actually as effective as they're meant to be. And so really the nets still might be a viable answer for the community, but we might need to add a training program or do something to create some buy-in around these nets before they're actually going to be used for their intended purpose of reducing malaria. But that information would be critical to us as an organization to really know that we're having the impact that we would hope to have. And if we're not, then we need to change some things up, right? So this is why, those are some of the reasons why we need evaluation. And evaluation at its simplest tells a program's effect on the people, families, or communities it is serving. That is whether a program is producing results or having the desired and sought after impact or result. And so we have some benefits to impact evaluation. I've just shared some of them, but can you guys think of any other benefits to conducting evaluation on our efforts, our ministry efforts?
Yeah, I think your examples of showing like people were using them for fishing it is just a good example of maybe there's another potential outreach or impact or ministry that could be developed of, let's get some fishing nets and help these people fish to feed their families and stuff too. So I think, the measurement alone doesn't show that because you don't know that people are using the nets you've given them for fishing and measurement, but evaluation, you find that out. So I think that's really helpful.
Yeah, I love that you bring that idea that conducting that process can really show additional needs that we could be meeting in the community that we might not have found out about unless we took the time to ask the right questions. So yeah, I agree, Jonathan. Thank you.
I think a couple things. Just one, we might find that what we're finding means that there's a need for greater education or greater, the front end of what are the nets for, how can they be used, how can they be give more education or prep on the front end of not just we're bringing you a net, but how are you going to take care of what you're going to use. So one would be that, and two, just to understand better the evaluation gives you a better idea of how you're utilizing your resource of time or talent or treasure in that, and how you can better utilize that moving forward.
Absolutely. Really well said, both of you. I really agree. I added a few things here. They're probably right in alignment with what you've said. I really think adding evaluation kind of takes you all the way, and then once you do that, you get into the learning and the cycles of improvement. But they help us to build a case for the existence of our programs, right? If we take the time to ask people how they're being impacted by the work that we're trying to do, or even better, before we even begin work, find out if there's a felt need for what we're offering in the area that we're going to, right? And try not to make assumptions, especially if we're crossing cultures, what we propose to do is actually desired by the community. So it builds a case for the existence of our programs so we can better understand our clients' felt wants and needs. It determines the effectiveness of our programs by evaluating real impact. It allows us to allocate our limited resources most effectively. It identifies areas for learning and improvement, justifies the addition of new programs. Like you said, maybe a fishing net program is needed. And it communicates our progress authentically to our current and future donors. And I think there's a misnomer that donors only want to hear the good things. I don't think that's always true. I think donors want to know what our challenges are and where we've tried something in the past and maybe it hasn't gone the way we thought, and we are able to show humility and that we're willing to adapt and to learn and to seek advice. I think it helps us show that we really are transparent when we share the good things and some of the challenges alongside of those things. And this process allows us to do that as we continue to invest in relationships with our donors. So that's what I have for us today. Next time, we are going to discuss how we can start some evaluation within our programs. And in preparation for that, I'd love for the two of you thought about the indicators you'd like to measure. I'm wondering, if you had a guess or a desire, what would the impact that you would like to show be from each of those kind of programs or indicators that you had identified? So from the ministry work that you're doing, what are the impacts that you would like to be seeing from that work? And then we can kind of build backward from there when we start to think about how we would evaluate those impacts, whether they're happening in the way we would desire, or if there's some areas we can learn and grow. Sound good?
Cool. Yeah.
Great.
That's great,
Thanks.
Sarah.
Thanks a lot, guys. I love it.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for your participation today. I love hearing from you and learning from you as well. And we will see you next time.